What's up, War Room Nation? Welcome to MMA in the War Room, brought to you by War Room Sports. This is the show we talk about and predict some of the upcoming MMA cards and talk about the cards that have recently passed. I'm joined by my co-host, Tommy from High Voltage MMA. Before we even get into the UFC 156, which is the card we're here to break down, Tommy, the last card, the UFC on Fox 6. You went 2-2, and I went 3-1. What was your overall takes from that card? Any surprises?
I guess my biggest surprise was Pettis. Not a huge surprise, really. I mean, I had Cerrone in that one. It didn't quite work out, didn't quite go our way there. Yeah. But it's not a huge surprise in terms of Pettis. Obviously, he's going to finish Cerrone as quickly as he did. I mean, Cerrone's a durable guy. I didn't expect it to happen that soon and in that fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely shocked by that. That was the only fight that I got wrong. Now, of course, the Lamas fight, I said it was a coin toss. It could go either way, so I got lucky there. But the one fight I got wrong, and was Cowboy. I had no idea that even if he did lose, I didn't think it would be in that fashion. Pettis was totally dominant in that fight, and salute to him. He has to get that title shot now, in my opinion, at least.
Oh, he will. I mean, when he first came from the WEC, when he beat Benson Henderson. They promised him a title shot. Mm-hmm. He got hurt, and then he ended up taking that other fight, an additional fight, and he lost. So he's definitely due. He's definitely earned his stripes and paid his dues at this point in the UFC as well as in the WEC. So he's ready for a title shot, and the fact that he won in such a convincing and dynamic fashion, I think makes him a great pick to compete for the title because he's already beat Benson Henderson once in the WEC, so there's some intrigue there. And just because of his dynamic striking style, I mean, people want to see this guy fight.
Yeah, I mean, the one move when he went off the cage and kneed him in the face. Something. Who does that? Who does that?
It's unbelievable. That was the Showtime kick, only in a knee fashion. That's the kick that he landed on Benson Henderson in the final fight in the WEC, and they dubbed it the Showtime kick. So he did the Showtime knee on that one. But what was even more interesting to me wasn't the Showtime knee. I think it was the second round, and Rogan didn't even really point it out at the time because he didn't even know what it was. But he actually did a cartwheel kick. It's a capoeira move, and he ended up making a cartwheel out of it because he didn't land the kick, but he did a handstand and went to kick him in the face and didn't land the kick quite the way he was looking to do so he just finished it off with a cartwheel, capoeira style, which is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, people do that at the beach when they're practicing capoeira, but to do that in the octagon during
with an opponent in front of you.
Right, with some guy trying to punch you in the face, is ridiculous. So
yeah, and that's the thing.
Next.
Yeah, not only is he one of the best fighters, but he's also one of the most entertaining fighters. So like I said, hopefully get that title shot. We'll see. But let's move on. Let's talk about the upcoming card, UFC 156. Now we're not going to break down the entire card because that will make this video about 3 hours. So we're going to take the top 3 fights, those that come on pay-per-view, the top 3 from pay-per-view. And the first fight will be Rashad Evans and Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, one of the Nogueira brothers.
Right.
Little Nog, so to speak.
That's right.
Little Nog, yeah. So when I talk to you about this fight, of course we always go over who has the advantage standing on the ground. But overall, what is your opinion of this fight?
I think Rashad Evans is going to take this fight. It's an interesting fight for a couple of reasons. One, in terms of if you just isolate different facets of the game, the boxing. So Minotauro is a Brazilian Olympic caliber boxer in Brazil. He was a national champion. He was a representative of Brazil, and he medaled in amateur boxing world championships. So he's obviously got very, very good boxing. Rashad also has incredible boxing, but I think where Rashad takes a slight edge, Minotauro might be a little bit more technical, maybe a little bit more proficient, technically speaking, but Rashad has incredible power, and he's got great speed as well. So from a striking standpoint, I still give the edge to Rashad just based on his explosiveness, his speed, and his power. On the ground, Minotauro it's again kind of the technical aspect of the game versus the straight raw athleticism type of thing. So Minotauro, obviously Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he's been a black belt for 11 years, and he technically probably has better submissions, better ground game. But Rashad can control where the fight goes with his wrestling and his takedown defense. It's that athleticism and that explosive ability that Rashad has. So you have kind of the dueling aspects of the fight game. You've got the technical prowess versus just the raw athleticism that Rashad Evans brings.
Yeah, and when I think about this fight personally, you made a lot of great points. his Nogueira's boxing is just tremendous. But the one thing I do notice in watching a lot of his fights is that he struggles with wrestlers. I mean, guys like Ryan Bader and Phil Davis, I mean, they gave him problems. And we all know that Evans is a top-notch wrestler.
That's right.
So I also have Rashad in this fight, and that's the reason why. Because although Nogueira has submissions, he has an amazing jits game, but I think that if you watch how his fights, his previous fights, just that when he fights someone who has a wrestling background, he always struggles. I don't know if he can fight off of his back, so to speak, with a top-notch wrestler. So I'm going to take Rashad Evans, and I'm going to take him by TKO, I'm going to say in round 2. In my personal opinion, Rashad Evans is one of the most underrated fighters, believe it or not. I mean, he gets a lot of credit, but when I think about watching him come from tough, he's always been in my top 5 or top 10 his entire career. I mean, this guy, he is popular, but he's not as popular as, say, Silva or John Bones Jones or GSP. Now, I'm not saying he's on their level, but at the end of the day, I think he's like maybe a notch right below them. He's one of the best fighters in the world, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely.
I mean, and his record indicates that. So I'm looking forward to him making a title run as well, and I think it starts with this fight here.
Yeah.
So I'm also taking Rashad.
I'm going to go out on the record, though, and oppose your viewpoint just slightly. I'm going to take him via decision. I think it's going to be a replay of the Bader fight in a lot of ways. I think it's going to be because Nogueira is durable. He's very, very tough.
Yeah.
So I do think Rashad is going to beat him, but I don't think he's going to be able to finish him. I think he takes a decision.
I know that is kind of crazy to say, considering both of the Nogueira brothers are very tough. I mean,
super durable.
We saw the one guy get his arm damn near broken off and still didn't tap. You know what I mean? So, I mean, he's a tough fighter. So, I'm just going on a limb. I'm going to say a TKO in round 2. But we both got Rashad Evans in that fight. Before we move on, anything else you want to say about that fight?
No, just that I agree. I mean, Rashad's beaten some of the very best at 205. He's beaten Rampage. He's beaten Chuck Liddell. He's beaten other top 205ers. He's just one of those guys that's just kind of hovering back and forth between title contention and then right down there. Not quite gatekeeper status, but right there on the cusp of title contention.
And people forget, when he was on the Ultimate Fighter, he was a heavyweight.
He sure was.
He was a heavyweight.
He was. He's a big guy. But what's interesting is there's talk of him actually going down to middleweight after this fight to fight Anderson Silva in a super fight.
Wow.
So we'll see if that happens. We'll see. I don't know that he has much left to do at 205 because he fought John Jones already. John Jones beat him handily. Yeah. And I don't know that he has much else to do. He can pretty much beat anybody else in the division. He's beat Machida,
And that's the thing. It's one of those things where he can probably beat everybody in the division with the exception of the champ.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
what else does he have to do?
And I'm a huge Anderson Silva fan. I'll go on the record as saying, in my opinion, he's the best pound for pound and probably the greatest MMA fighter ever. But that fight would kind of scare me if I was Silva, just because he struggles with wrestlers. And just mentioned Rashad, when it comes to wrestling, he's top-notch wrestler. So
absolutely.
I would look forward to that, but he has to get past Nogueira first, who's not an easy opponent. But we both do have Rashad in this fight. So let's just move on. Let's talk about the heavyweights, the big guys. Alistair Overeem versus Antonio Bigfoot Silva. So, how do you see this fight?
I think this one's going to be interesting. I don't think this one's very difficult to predict or to call. I think Alistair, I don't know if you've seen pictures of him lately versus pictures of him when he fought in Pride, but when he fought in Pride back in, say, 2003, 2004 timeframe, he fought at middleweight, which in Pride was 203 pounds, I believe. Yeah. And he's now a 258-pound.
He looks like a superhero.
Shredded, massive muscle. I don't know if he's got the antler spray or what he has going on.
He looks like a superhero, for Christ's sakes. I mean, this guy, he's jacked, but but let's not forget, he did get in trouble. He is coming off a suspension.
Right.
With some, But anyway, this is his first fight off that suspension. But how do you see the fight going, though?
I think this one's going to be definitive. I think he's going to take out Bigfoot via TKO in round number 1.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to have too much trouble. I think this is just a setup fight. I think they're putting him in line for title contention, but they can't put him immediately back into the heavyweight title fray just yet because he's coming off the suspension. They need to give him one more fight to kind of prop him up. But I don't expect anything can happen. I could certainly be wrong, but I don't expect Bigfoot Silva to give him all that much of a difficult time.
It's funny because we didn't even talk about this before doing the show, and that's intentionally, but I kind of see it exactly the same way in terms of him being set up to, make a shot at the title because he has a huge fan base. I mean, he's a great kickboxer. And if you look at Bigfoot Silva, we know his chin is not the best. He got knocked out by Cormier.
Mm-hmm.
He struggled with Cain Velasquez and Mike Kyle with their striking. So I also have it in the first round. I think it'd be a very impressive fight, and I think he's going to knock Bigfoot out.
Yeah.
So, and I think that he's also going to be very excited and hungry to get into the cage, considering his 14-month layoff.
Right.
This is his first appearance in the UFC in the 14 months because he was suspended for the drugs or what have you. But the guy looks like a damn superhero. I says, this is amazing. 260. They go from 203 to 265. It looks like it's all muscle. So
it is.
It's crazy.
He's never been anything but very, very lean. When he fought, for the Warm Sports fans out there, they can just do a quick Google, Alistair Overeem then and now. And what you'll see is a picture of him back in 2003 when he was fighting at middleweight in Pride, which is 203 pounds, versus a shot from like 2010 even. So it's not even now, today. And just the difference, the transition that this guy's made is incredible.
It's like when you see him, he's like he should be tested right away as soon as you see him.
I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he passes muster. I don't know if he's going to get popped again. I'm not sure how that works. There's different regulatory bodies. So when they fight in Brazil, for example, they don't have say the Nevada State Athletic Commission to test these fighters. So the UFC actually imposes their own testing on these guys. If they're fighting in California or in Nevada, they actually have the state-sanctioned athletic commissions to impose the testing. So
that's interesting.
It's interesting. But for Silva, I don't really see any way that he can win this fight. I mean, if
he lands a lucky shot, he's going to have to land the lucky shot.
Right. I mean, for him to beat somebody, he's going to have to probably overpower them because he's not going to get by on his dazzling skills or speed or anything like that. So he's going to have to kind of outmuscle and overpower somebody and maybe outstrike them on the feet. Well, he's not going to outmuscle and overpower Alistair Overeem. And remember, Alistair Overeem, in addition to his MMA credentials, was a 2010 K1 World Grand Prix heavyweight champion. So you're talking about the best heavyweight kickboxer on the planet. So his stand-up is unrivaled at the heavyweight division. Yep,
that's exactly the point I was making. In terms of kickboxing, it doesn't get any better. So, hey, we both in agreement with that one as well. Here's a tough one. Well, at least for me, this was a tough fight to pick, and that's the main event: Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo for the UFC Featherweight Championship. And before I even ask you your opinion, I'm going to say the reason this was difficult for me is because watching Frankie Edgar, come up and grow as a fighter, I'm a fan of not only his ability in the cage, but he seems like a cool guy. So I'm a Frankie Edgar fan, but Jose Aldo was a beast. So it's like. And I could see it going either way. So for me, this was a very difficult fight to predict. With that being said, Tommy, you're the expert here. How do you see this fight? And what are your opinions of this fight in terms of the entire, stand-up, the ground game, and who you have?
Well, first I'll go on the record and make my pick. It's going to sound wishy-washy, so I'll go ahead and put that out there first. And it's Jose Aldo. I think he's going to retain his featherweight title, even though he's coming off a bit of a layoff. I could be wrong, and just like the last card, you could beat me. I think it was 3-1 versus 2 for 2 in picks. But I'm going to go ahead and make my pick. But there's a couple of different ways I think this could play out. And as you mentioned, being a fan of Frankie Edgar, it's hard not to be a fan of Frankie Edgar because when you see him in interviews, not that I know the guy, but when you see him in interviews, you see him do impressors and things like that. He's very humble. And he seems like he's come from kind of a workman-like, blue-collar background. He's a very humble guy. And when you watch his fights with Gray Maynard, those are the fights that turned me into Frankie Edgar fan. Because Gray Maynard was, especially in their first fight, actually they were both brutal. He was laying a beating on Frankie Edgar to the point where at any minute you were like, okay, they're going to stop the fight. They're going to stop the fight. When are they going to stop this fight? And Frankie Edgar, with just the heart of a champion, just finds a way to come back. And he has, in 3 fights total with Gray, 1 loss to Gray, but then he has 1 victory and 1 draw over Gray Maynard. Yeah. So that trilogy is what made me a Frankie Edgar fan, first and foremost. Yeah. Some folks might think that, sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
Some folks might think he has a slight size advantage because he's coming down from 155 to 145. I don't really think that's the case because he was a small lightweight to begin with. He didn't actually cut any weight. He fought at 155, and if you look at the stare downs and you look at all of his fights, he was always a smaller guy. He didn't cut any weight to fight at 155. So Jose Aldo's probably, because he's a big featherweight who does cut weight, probably just as big, if not bigger than Frankie, even though Frankie's coming down from 55 to 45. So I don't think size is necessarily going to be that much of a factor. So I think what it comes down to in this fight is Jose Aldo's ability to control the distance with his leg kicks and his nasty strikes. And I don't know if that he'll finish Frankie, but I definitely think he will outpoint him, and he'll do a lot of cumulative damage in the first couple of rounds, because Jose Aldo likes to start fast. Frankie sometimes takes some punishment in the first couple of rounds, and it takes him a little bit to warm up. The Gray Maynard fights being a perfect example. He'll kind of absorb some punishment and kind of just, maybe he needs to get hit to wake up and realize he's going to fight. I don't know.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, like I said, I'm a huge Frankie Edgar fan because of all the reasons you just named. I mean, how can you not be a fan of this guy? So for me, I'm also going with Aldo, but I'm going with Aldo by a split decision. So we actually agree on every fight. I'm just going to say a split decision just because here's the thing. I'm actually going to root for Frankie Edgar, but I think he's going to lose. How about that? Because, and you also pointed out something to me before we, got on the program. You said that Frankie Edgar, if he wins the fight, he'll have held belts in 2 different weight classes.
That's right.
And the only other people to do that are B.J. Penn and Randy Couture, who are both legends.
Right.
So, he's fighting for a lot here, and it's just hard to root against the guy. But you mentioned something that I also have written here in my notes. Those leg kicks from Jose Aldo. He has like some of the best leg kicks in all of MMA.
Absolutely. Some of the best leg kicks.
People. He destroys people by kicking them in the leg. So, and I think that, like you said, that will help him outpoint Frankie Edgar. I think it's going to be a great fight. I'm going to root for Frankie Edgar, but, just trying to be objective and put my analytical hat on. I have Aldo by a split decision.
Interesting. I'm going to take him by unanimous decision.
Okay.
Now, Frankie, if you look at a couple of his last fights, one of the things you'll notice, and he did better with this the second time he fought Ben Henderson, but he's susceptible to those leg kicks. And that just happens to be Jose Aldo's, one of his secret weapons. I mean, he's got numerous weapons, but that's certainly one of them. And Jose Aldo uses those leg kicks for a couple of reasons. One, it's obvious to inflict massive damage and to take a fighter's ability to lean on that leg. You kind of disable and disrupt anything they try to do, because they have so much pain in that lead leg. They can't lean on it to throw their strikes properly. They can't move as well as they should. But he also uses his leg kicks to close the distance, to keep distance, and to sort of pace the fight in terms of the movement. So that's certainly something that I'm sure Frankie's been mindful of. I'm sure he's training for it. But I still believe that Jose Aldo is going to be able to utilize his striking ability to take this one. If you look at his last fight against Chad Mendes, it's incredible. Chad Mendes, another really good wrestler, much like Frankie Edgar, had his back, had him up against the cage, and was inflicting some damage with some strikes. Jose Aldo, it just took him a split second to break free and turn around and throw a knee. It almost looked like and it's knocked him out cold. He obviously had a couple of follow-up punches on the ground, but he knocked him out that way. All he needed was just a split second to create some distance and launch that strike, and that was it. Yeah,
you're right. You brought up the Ben Henderson fight with Frankie. And a lot of people in their second fight think that, Frankie got robbed.
Yeah, absolutely they do.
So you're in agreement with you also think that Frankie should have got that fight?
I think it could have gone either way, and you probably could have made a case for it. I had Ben Henderson in that one, personally, on my card.
Just wondering.
It definitely could have gone either way, and they could fight again, and I'm sure it would be an incredible fight. But this is the move that he's wanted Frankie to make. He's wanted him to drop down to 45. That's really his most competitive weight class, just because he doesn't cut weight at 55. But one other interesting note is that we mentioned the trilogy with Gray Maynard. Jose Aldo has actually become friends with Gray Maynard, and Gray's been helping Jose Aldo prep and giving him tips and helping him prep for this fight. So he's got a little bit of an inside track there.
Interesting. That's interesting right there. Not that Aldo even needed it. Aldo is an amazing fighter. Like you said, some of the things that he's done is hard to believe. But, this should be another exciting fight. This is why it's the main event, and it's for the championship. So, any last thoughts on any fight in this card before we get out of here, Tommy?
No, I guess I'll throw out one more pick. I think in the John Fitch, Damian Maia fight, I know we didn't really plan on discussing that one or have that on the main roster of fights that we're going to discuss, but I think John Fitch is going to take that one via decision as well.
Here's funny, because we agree this time on every fight, and I also have John Fitch. Even though we didn't really break down that fight, I have John Fitch. John Fitch is, I'm a fan of John Fitch as well. Damian Maia has an amazing jiu-jitsu game, but
Absolutely.
I'm going for Fitch as well. So how about that? We all have the same picks. We both have Rashad. You have by decision. I have TKO. Overeem, we both say first round knockout. And in Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo, I say split decision. You say unanimous, but we both have Aldo winning the fight. So there it is. You know, we'll see. We'll see what happens this time. Either both of us are bad or both of us are good.
Well, either way, what kind of upsets me right now is you're still going to be one up on me regardless of what happens. And you know I'm keeping score.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't think I'm not keeping score.
Absolutely. It is funny because when I looked at this card, I says, you know, these fights are actually. You mentioned it as well. It looks like a lot easier to pick than the last fights because those fights on Fox were very difficult to pick, and a lot of fights could have went either way. You know, but anyway, don't forget, guys, to comment, subscribe, let us know how you feel about our picks, and give us your picks. And until next time, everybody, don't accept mediocrity and be steadfast in the war against ignorance. I'll see you chumps on top. We're out.
Kuwait is the war room with 5 nights at the round table. 5 Philly guys diversified and educated.